What's up? Hey, hello everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about the Traitors season 2, episode 6. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa. This was a really spicy episode of The Traitors. Everything that we said was going to happen basically did happen. I was super hyped watching this episode. This was, I feel like, the best episode so far of the season. I'm super excited to get to talk about it.
And once again, they cliffhanger us so well because I'm like, I just want it to be next week already because I need to see the fallout of this episode every single
Right?
week. I feel like this happens.
Yeah, and I feel like they intentionally cut it that way because,
Hmm.
they totally could have showed us, this week whether or not what happens, but they decided not to. So,
They
boo.
do it so well. They keep us coming back Thursdays at 9 p.m. But we start off this episode literally in the first few minutes, learn that no murder happened. I was like, okay, dang, we're really jumping into it. We're not even going to like dilly dally around the bush here. In last week's preview, we see the table for this week, and people online, super sleuth, they see, okay, Bergie's still there, everyone's still there, no one was probably murdered at night. So last week we are sort of already teed up that no murder happened, but first 2 seconds of this episode, we learn no murder happened and Bergie lives.
Yep, and I feel like, I don't know, basically everything we said last week about how if Dan murder or tries to murder Bergie, like that's a stupid choice and he would deserve whatever's coming to him. That's kind of how I feel because I'm like, feel like this episode was basically all about Dan's downfall, and I feel like he still had a lot of heat on him regardless, but he got even more heat on him because he tried to murder Berkey when everyone knew that it was a bad idea. So, yeah. I don't feel
Yeah,
bad for Dan this episode.
it was definitely the downfall of Dan episode. And even last week, he had that one confessional like, oh, it's either going to win me the game or lose me the game. And as we see this week, it does lose him the game. Dan should have listened to Parvati last week saying, oh, Peter's totally lying. He's trying to bait us and trap us. I loved Peter's reactions, everyone's reactions at breakfast, and they were like all so excited. Peter was so happy in his all black outfit. I was like, oh, this is so cute to see. And I just loved seeing everyone's like facial reactions this episode. And then Bergie pulls out the shield at breakfast. I was like, oh my God, this is so cute. Finally, the Traitors aren't just winning so successfully, but the faithfuls, they're getting a little taste of what it's like to be good at this game.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm worried about is I feel like it might happen where the faithfuls basically just totally dominate now that they've gotten one traitor out. And I guess the reason why kind of starts at breakfast because Peter says, I only told 3 people that I had a shield. Therefore, one of those 3, and maybe more than one of those 3, must be a traitor. And like we covered last week, the 3 people that he said, or that he told about him being shielded were CT, Parvati, and Dan. And so obviously he believes that, CT, Parvati, and Dan, one of them or more than one of them must be the traitor. And I feel like CT has done a really good job of being faithful this season. So, no one's really got heat on CT. So, Peter's pretty sure that Parvati and Dan are traitors. And I don't know. I feel like just this whole episode was kind of not only Dan's downfall, but I feel like we learned that Parvati has had some people saying her name and she has not been as successful at, kind of downplaying her threat level as maybe we thought earlier into the season. And so I've seen some people talking on Edgic about this and kind of the idea of, we were allowed to believe for a very long time that Parvati was being very successful as a traitor and wasn't, getting any heat on her, but that was not the case. And I wonder if part of that is because they did want to show us, this time, all of the traitors kind of going down at once. So I think that'll be interesting to kind of see the reaction of was all of the Parvati, gameplay just to lead up to this moment of the traitors' tragic downfall. So
I'm excited to see, like, in this episode, episode 6, as well as the rest of the season, like, how the Traitors play on the back foot and not be, like, so successfully winning. How can they dig themselves out of this hole potentially? Like we said last week, Dan is underestimating Peter just because he's from The Bachelor, a non-strategic show. Like, these people could potentially be very good, even though some of them are very himbo energy still. I feel like Dan underestimating Peter last week, this week, is part of that downfall. And I thought at the start of this episode, okay, Dan and Parvati maybe should turn on one another if they were very, very self interested. If Peter is coming for each of them individually, it's every person for themselves. Like they were saying, every traitor for themselves. Low key, even though they have a friendship and like, okay, they're protecting the friendship, so Dan's not gonna throw Parvati under the bus, but low key, maybe in a game like this, I feel like you could try to throw Parv under the bus instead of Phaedra here, but maybe they also should have coordinated a plan together and we didn't see it in the episode of how they could like tag team work together to try to dig one or both of them out of this hole.
I think part of it is though kind of what happened this episode was as soon as Dan tries to throw someone under the bus, it didn't actually help him seem less suspicious. It just put suspicion on the other person as well, which I think is something that we're probably going to talk about because, you know, Dan threw Phaedra's name out last minute, and I feel like that was a bad choice for him. I feel like the problem with Dan is kind of something that we started talking about several weeks ago, which
Mm-hmm.
is that he's been playing the game too slow and kind of the idea of he should have been making these moves a while ago. Like he should have been planting seeds of doubt about Phaedra a while ago and not just now that he's on the chopping block. Because it kind of seems like very desperate, where, you know, I'll say anything that will get not me eliminated. And so I think that's kind of the problem where no amount of conniving this episode specifically could have saved Dan, I feel like.
I agree. I'm like, Dan says this episode, the time for being passive is over. I'm like, okay, it's a little bit too late. You can't just say a name at the round table. People were asking you before, and you're still not going to share. Like, okay, sure, grandstanding it at the round table, fine. But I agree, it is a little bit too late. If you wanted to look less sketch, like you shouldn't do it when your back's up against the wall because everyone's just going to see right through it. They're going to just see, hey, you're just trying to save yourself in whatever way possible. Okay, maybe you're just a quiet guy, you're watching people and you have no theories until you're about to get voted out, then you have a theory. Looks very, very sketchy. But we get to the challenge. You have to collect these big pieces to create a catapult and then shoot bags in order to win money. I thought this was a fun part of the episode because like Trishelle and Kevin are like drowning each other, fighting in the water to get a shield box. Peter gets a shield box, but then Kate tries to maybe take it and she's acting all like, I don't really care. And then Peter's like, yo, you are not taking that. That's my box. Sheree gets a box. Sandra and Parvati get a box.
Yeah, and I wonder if it's a challenge like challenges like these that they kind of regret voting out Bananas and like some of the other strong dudes, because it's like I bet that challenge would have been a lot easier if they had more muscle. But you know, it is what it is. So I feel like this challenge was really fun because you really got to see them struggle. And I
Mm.
also really liked the kind of twist of the shield box where it's not everyone who gets a box automatically gets a shield. It's, you know, you have the chance to get a shield when you get a shield box, because you think, especially now that the field is getting smaller, having too many shields would have been a bad thing.
Yeah, I'm glad all 5 of them weren't automatically immune just because they got a box, but it was a chance to win a box, because then there's a lot of strategy you can use there, like Parvati saying, "Oh, I'm gonna take a box," even though she knows she's safe, but if she were a faithful and she was getting heat on her, it makes sense that you would want to at least have the chance for a shield because you're going to maybe get murdered at night or voted out, eliminate like might as well just try for it, because if she were faithful, like Peter thinks he might get murdered in the night now because he's being too outspoken. It comes across as very faithful trying to get a shield here.
Yeah, but I think it's also one of those things where they know that, you know, the traders will be performing for it. And I think kind of seems faithful, but then also kind of doesn't. I also wonder if it would be interesting if they had shields that also worked at the round table, just because I feel like that could be something that would be good for Parvati of like, I kind of like a survivor immunity idol where like I can't be voted out either. That might give her more time to kind of work her magic as far as, social strategizing her way into making people believe that she's a faithful. So I guess also it seems very traitor-y if you want the shield just so that you can't be voted out at the round table. And it probably also would give the traitors too much power if that were the case. So
Yeah, then it's like, what if they could never be eliminated because they kept on getting round table shields instead of like the murder nighttime shields? It'd be, I guess, an interesting twist, or like a secret shields that could be used either at the round table or at the nighttime portion could be an interesting addition to the game. But like everything in this game, it could be taken as traitorous, it could be taken as faithful, like any little thing could be interpreted either way. Sheree is the one that wins the shield, which is sort of a moot point because like we really know nothing about her. So it's like, dang, sort of want Peter to win it so he can't get murdered kind of thing, since he's bringing a lot of like the drama and the theories to the episodes. It'd be sort of sucky if he just got killed off tonight.
you see, part of my problem with Peter is like I think he's playing a very good game for us faithful, but I think also one of the things that made me not like him as much is he got so convinced of his theories so quickly. Like I guess from an audience perspective, it seems like he went from kind of suspecting Parvati and Dan to like totally suspecting only Parvati and Dan, and it's kind of like it was not fun to feel like there was no chance for Parvati and Dan to like talk their way out of it. Just because like if you're someone who roots for both the faithful and the traitors, now it's kind of like, okay, well, apparently they've pegged all of the traitors now. Like it's not as fun of a game once they've pegged all the traitors and it's just like, oh, when are we going to get them out one by one? So I think I wouldn't mind if Peter was murdered because I feel like in some ways that makes the game less interesting.
True. I guess like with there's ways I feel like Parvati and Phaedra now after Peter gets maybe recruited at the end of this episode that they can do things in the future. I feel like for them, they have to kill off the Faithful Five alliance because the voting block of five, the Peter, Trishelle, Bergie, John, Kevin group, and now people aren't really suspecting CT anymore. Sheree doesn't really get much screen time. Maybe you vote Kate out because you're like, okay, she came in late, so she could be a faithful, but she could be a traitor. Like, metagaming it, maybe you're thinking she's probably a traitor because she's like the other celebrity guest this season and she came in halfway through. Like, just vote her out. You wouldn't want her to get to the end just in case, because maybe she came in with a special power because she is the guest this season kind of thing. So I do feel like they need to break up that five though, because a voting block of five people where like you're never going to banish Bergie, you're never banishing John, you're never banishing Kevin. Like that's dangerous because they're so faithful.
Which is also why it was so stupid that last episode Dan took a shot at Bergie instead of taking a shot at John, because it's like no one's going to suspect John because he's so faithful. You could have gotten someone else out and not had as much heat on your back. So I guess not to keep ragging on Dan, but like geez Louise, that was painful. So
So
I think
yeah, Dan says, I'm gonna throw a name out at the round table. I'm like, okay, finally. Like we've been edged so hard. Like, what are you gonna do? You've been saying you're gonna say a name this entire time, but you haven't said a name. You haven't told us anything. He like you have to throw another traitor under the bus here. You need the faithful to be like, oh, okay, he's actually just observing, he was actually just listening. Maybe we can trust him and he's actually good for our team, because like we heard a few episodes ago, it's like, okay, Dan, if you're not talking and giving us clues of what you're thinking, you're a useless faithful, so we should just vote you out anyways because you're not helping us. So it makes sense you're going to pick a traitor here to throw under the bus. It just is the question, okay, who is he going to pick, Parvati or Phaedra here? But I think at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because he's saying a name now and it's a little bit too late, like we said. When he throws out a name, I would be thinking, like Trishelle said, oh, he only threw out this name because he knows that Phaedra's a traitor because Dan is a traitor. And then when it gets revealed that Dan is the traitor, you're like, obviously Phaedra's a traitor too, because why else would he say her name?
Yeah, and I guess if you're playing from the perspective of like Dan should want any traitor to win, even if he's not, that was the dumbest move. Like, I feel like people would have been just as happy with Parvati's name, and then also it wouldn't be throwing another traitor under the bus. You know, there would be a traitor who could then keep on keeping on in the game. And I guess when they were going into this roundtable, like Dan was offered by Peter. Peter said, like, you know, if you want us to vote Parvati and you say that you'll vote Parvati with us, like it's a done deal. We'll vote Parvati with you. And he said that he wouldn't do that because they were like tight or whatever, which I guess like good for him for being loyal, but also kind of like Rachel and I were talking a bit about this where it's like if you're Dan, you're kind of toast anyway. So maybe you want to make it so that your number one can get through a little bit further. But then also, like Parvati also seems like she was kind of toast anyway, too. So I think it was kind of a lose-lose for Dan where he's going to go home regardless. Parvati is probably going to go home regardless. Like, what do you do about that?
Yeah, I think for Dan, like if you're totally self-interested, you didn't care about your friendships, you just care about maybe winning the game or getting further in the game, I think throwing Parvati under the bus here probably would have been the easier option, but like it makes sense. Okay, you're friends, you're not going to throw her under the bus, but maybe you could have rallied more votes to get her out over Phaedra. It just feels like, okay, Dan, we're saying your name. We are trying to vote you out here. We are going to banish you because you're very sketchy and you don't say much. And then you come out left field with all of these like sort of weird accusations like, oh, Phaedra's facial reactions at breakfast are like very terrible and she's overreacting at breakfast. It just like a little bit feeling too grasping at straws, like maybe you need a little bit more concrete evidence because like a facial reaction can sort of be taken anyway, especially at like breakfast, like, oh yeah, she's hugging Larsa, they're friends from outside of the show, like it makes sense she would be consoling Larsa after Marcus gets voted out. Like those kinds of things can easily be taken a different way than how Dan was trying to portray it. And
Like,
I don't know, like
Dan's
Phaedra not having any like suspicion on her really, it just like she's got so many friends. It's such an uphill battle to try to get her voted out here.
also Dan's whole like starting premise was flawed, which was he started from, you know, who's never received a vote at the round table. And it's like, why is that your starting criteria? Because it's like you would think that it would be an easier battle if you were like, you know, this person that you voted for before, he is in fact a traitor. Like, especially if you could do something like, you know, Trishelle went so hard on day one after Peppermint because she knew that she was a traitor and that she needed to make sure to get past the first day. And like, there were so many other ways you could have done this other than by throwing Phaedra under the bus. And I guess I've seen people online saying that it's like bad sportsmanship on Dan's part. And like, I don't think it's necessarily bad sportsmanship. I think it's just kind of a dumb game move because it's like, you were never going to be able to convince people that Phaedra was a traitor. And I think, or at least not immediately. And now people only think Phaedra is a traitor because you said her name, you know? So,
Mhm. Yeah,
yeah.
like if you were hinting along about Phaedra along the way to throw her under the bus, it makes more sense that you would go hard now, but like the vote thing too, okay. I think having no votes against Phaedra at these roundtables also goes to show that Phaedra is liked by a lot of people. She's playing a fine game enough that she's not being sussed as sketchy or as traitorous. So that just also goes to show how much of an uphill battle it would be to try to eliminate someone so insulated. And that's what we said before when Parvati was going to go after the housewives at the roundtable. We were like, yeah, low key, you should go after them because Phaedra's got a lot of friends. They're going to trust her. They're maybe not going to vote her out because she doesn't come across as super sketchy like that. So that's why she is so dangerous because she's very well liked. She's very insulated. Her and Bergie have a good relationship with the Bergalicious stuff. Her and CT have a very, very good relationship too. So, like, I don't know. You got to say F the friendships and throw Parvati under the bus here.
Yep. But I will say I am very excited to see Parvati and Phaedra working together without Dan, just because I feel like they could definitely be a power couple.
Yeah, I liked Phaedra. I was like, "Oh, Dan throwing her under the bus, she is gonna be so mad." She did well fighting back here at the round table, so I was like, "Okay, I like this content. I like seeing people fight for their life in this game." So it's really interesting to see, okay, this is Dan's point of view. This is his creation argument that he came up with, and then Phaedra defending herself, and then like all of her friends jump in too. Like Kate was defending her, Bergie defending her. So it's like she's got a lot of friends here.
Yeah, though I think that in the end, Phaedra still might get heat just because people have clocked that she's a traitor now. But she, like she and Parvati said, Phaedra's entering the hospital, but Parvati's in the ICU. So
100% agreed. Like once Dan gets says he's a traitor after he gets voted out, like you got to have your eyes on Phaedra, like Trishelle said, and then Bergie in an interview said, "Yeah, people mentioned this. Like Dan threw her under the bus because he's a traitor. He knows she's a traitor." But I agree. Like the ICU hospital comment, you might as well just vote Parvati out next or soon, and then just keep Phaedra around until the end, because once they learn that, okay, someone gets eliminated, they have the chance to recruit, and they'll know that a recruit happened because no one got murdered at night. You're not going to want to just eliminate the traitors back to back to back, like we said at the beginning of the game, because if you keep voting out the traitors, they'll just get a new number each time, which makes it very, very hard to like suss out, okay, who's was a faithful and who's now a traitor. So it's like, I'd vote Parvati out after what Peter said and everything this week, and then keep Phaedra around for a little bit until the end of the game.
yeah, kind of keep Phaedra around so you know the traitors aren't recruiting more people, but at least like you know when it gets down to like final five, who to vote out.
Yeah, so at the end of the episode, Dan goes, and then we get to the turret, and they get the choice. You have the opportunity to recruit or murder. Parvati's like, okay, we can't kill Peter, we can't murder him tonight, but what if we recruit him to get everyone off of the sense? And then maybe you try to throw Peter under the bus, which is interesting though, because I think Peter probably will say yes, but I feel like Peter, out of the last three Traitors here, probably has the best chances of winning the game now if he says yes.
Yeah, I feel like Peter definitely has the least suspicion on him because he is so faithful. So I feel like in some ways, if you're Peter, like it would be ridiculous not to say yes, just because they're basically signing the check for you. Like all you have to do is keep your core group of five and just like vote off the other faithful, and then like bada bing, bada boom. Like he could burn the candle from both ends because he knows who the other traitors are. He also knows who the faithful are, who he can just vote out at roundtables. I feel like the hardest thing for Peter would be whether or not he would be able to like kind of pull back some of the heat from like Phaedra and Parvati and be able to say like, you know, we should keep them around just in case so that the like traitors don't recruit more. And I think also one of the things that's going to be interesting is they have to assume that if there was no murder, then someone got recruited. Because like it's not like last time where the traitors didn't know who got the shield. Like everyone knows that Sheree has the shield, so it would either them being stupid to murder her or something else must have happened. So maybe Peter gets some heat on him if people figure out that there was a recruitment. But even then, I feel like that would still kind of be a reach.
I think the upcoming weeks really comes down to Peter's acting chops, like mentally, physically, emotionally. Can he act now as a faithful while also being a traitor? Like, can he backstab his friends like this in this faithful five alliance? Like, can he mentally, emotionally do it? Or will it be so taxing on him that he F's up and like messes up and like can't act like a faithful anymore? Because I think if they're this close as a group together and he starts acting differently tomorrow and they learn that someone was recruited, it could tip people off. Like, okay, if I were the traitors, I would maybe want to recruit Peter because he's so anal about us being traitors that we would want him on our team, and then maybe he gets some heat from that. So it will be interesting to see if Peter, Bachelor Peter, Pilot Pete, if he can act like a faithful and a traitor, or will it be too emotionally taxing for him that he messes up somewhere?
I guess also, if you're Peter, you can say, I was offered the chance to be a traitor and I declined. I need to get a shield next time because they're going to try to get me. And that way, you also, it's brilliant because then you have a reason to like ask people to give you the shield. And so you know that the shield isn't going to a faithful. That would be potentially a risky gamble to be like, they asked me and I said no. But I think if Peter really wanted to stretch his acting chops, he could.
Yeah, I feel like that would be very, very risky to the point I don't know if I personally would tell people that you were potentially like asked to be recruited, because then I feel like once you get down to the end and you can just continue voting people out or end the game, if I were there, it's like, okay, you might as well just vote him out because he has some kind of suspicion against him because he said he was asked to be recruited. Maybe we just vote you out. We split the money less ways. Even though we're friends with you, we like you as a person, you have 1% suspicion against you, I just eliminate you and vote not to end the game. Just keep eliminating because then your chances are higher of winning too if there's less people there.
That's true. I guess I didn't really think about like the whole 1% suspicion thing from Peter's perspective, but that makes sense too. Like, just don't even cop to maybe having the chance to betray the faithful.
Yeah, I feel like if I were Peter, I would say yes. Like he said, you could stay faithful in the game, but maybe then the traitors just decide to murder you at night unless you think you can win shields from here on out. But I think, like Bergie said a few episodes ago, the whole point of the game is to make it to the end because then you have a chance at the money. If you don't make it to the end because you get voted out or because you get murdered, like there's no point because you have no chance at the money. So I think for Peter, if you want a chance at the money, you might as well take the offer because otherwise you might get murdered at night.
Yeah, I think for Peter, it makes most sense. I mean, you could maybe make the argument that, like, he's so dyed in the wool faithful that, like, he has to remain true to his faithful, but I think that would be kind of dumb. He already lost the
Yeah.
Bachelor. I feel like he doesn't want to lose the Traitors as well.
And like maybe instead of picking Peter here, you leave him as faithful, then maybe you murder him in the nighttime kind of thing. But like he was so gung ho about Parvati, it looks very sketch. But you could say, oh, they're framing me. But I feel like the whole framing argument sort of is like not a very good one kind of thing. Cause it's like, okay, but then you can just say you're being framed and like 3 steps ahead. But maybe you pick CT here because if you really are thinking, let's just pick an easy person that we can throw under the bus, maybe you pick CT and try to get him eliminated right away. But I feel like for Parvati, because she's seriously on the chopping block, Peter's probably the best option because otherwise Parvati's probably going home next.
Yeah, I think if Parvati doesn't recruit Peter, there's no way that she stays. Like, I
But
think she could make a successful argument of, like, I was really close to Dan and our closeness, like, blinded me to the fact he was a traitor, but I'm not sure that that argument would go any better.
because it'll be interesting to see next week if Peter does say yes. Like, does he switch up and like take a step back from trying to target Parvati, or does he continue to be super faithful and be like, okay, we got one last week, let's vote out Parvati this time and just make it down to him and Phaedra as a duo? Because I feel like he's so gung ho. Like, he was like, okay, good night, everyone. If I get killed tonight, don't forget about Parvati. Like, don't forget what I said. Vote her out next. If he switches up that quick, it will look very sketchy. So I feel like for Peter, if he accepts, he should still try to get Parvati voted out at the next roundtable. Otherwise, it just looks like too much of a switch up.
I think that he should try to get Parvati voted out, but maybe have another name in mind. That way, like, if someone else is like, actually, I think it's so and so. Like, I think he should still go for Parvati, but if someone else throws out a name, be willing to be like, you know what, we can get Parvati later. Let's go with your name. because I think that if you're a new traitor, you don't want to instantly just like backstab another traitor. Like, you just don't want to do that. It's rude. So,
Yeah, you look really untrustworthy. But then it's like looking at the rest of the cast, who's gonna throw out a name that you're going to be like, "Yeah, let's go with your plan." Like, they're not gonna follow Kevin's plan, John's plan, that kind of thing. So, like, maybe Kate comes up with a plan and you're like, "Okay, Kate, let's go with that. You are new. Let's help you out here." I'm like, everyone else, I'd say if Kate or CT comes up with a plan, or maybe Trishelle, then Peter can be like, "Oh, sounds good. I actually believe that. You have a very good argument. Let's vote your way and not vote Parvati out. We can vote her out next time." But, like, no one's listening to these other people.
yeah, I think that's kind of the dangerous position of being Pete, who's in a position of power kind of within the Faithful Alliance, but who also might have to be a double agent.
Yeah, he's the leader of the faithful. People trust him. People see that he's intelligent, good head on his shoulders for this game. So I'm so excited for next week. I'm like, can it be Thursday now? Because there's a lot of stuff to unfold next week. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Just, I want to know for sure that Peter accepts, because if he doesn't accept, that's going to be spicy in a totally different way.
Uh, yeah, I'm like, he probably has got to accept.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, let us know in the comments down below what you thought of this episode. Do you think Peter's going to accept their offer as a traitor or not? Who do you think Dan should have threw under the bus out of Parvati and Phaedra? Or do you think he maybe should have thrown a faithful under the bus and tried to get CT voted out here, or someone else random? Do you think he could have even saved himself, or was his back up against the wall too much that he was basically a cooked egg on the way out the door? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you all so much for watching, and